Sometimes, life throws challenges at us that seem impossible to overcome. Imagine being so desperate for help that even the smallest act of kindness feels like a miracle. But what if that miracle came from someone you least expected? Someone who had no idea their simple gesture would change not just one life, but two. Before we dive into the story, I want you to think about something. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed help but didn't know where to turn? Or maybe you've seen someone struggling and wondered if there was anything you could do to make their day better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from, whether it's a cozy corner of your home or somewhere else entirely. It helps me understand how far these stories travel. Let's dive in. It was early morning when Nolan Parker rolled up the sleeves of his faded blue shirt and wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. The air smelled faintly of oil and grease, a scent he'd grown accustomed to over the years. At just 19, Nolan ran a small mechanic shop tucked away on the edge of town. It wasn't much, a single garage bay, a cluttered workbench, and an old sign that read Parker's Fix-It Shop in peeling letters. But it was his pride and joy. His parents had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him nothing but debts and memories. This shop was his way of keeping himself afloat. Nolan had always been good with his hands. He could take apart an engine and put it back together faster than anyone else in town. Yet, despite his talent, business wasn't booming. People preferred bigger shops with fancier tools, places that promised quick fixes without any personal touch. Still, Nolan kept going. Every car he repaired meant another day closer to paying off his parents' loans. And every customer who walked through his door reminded him why he started this in the first place: to help people. That morning, as Nolan tightened the bolts on a rusty pickup truck, he heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, he saw a man standing by the entrance. The stranger looked older, probably in his late 60s, wearing worn-out shoes and clothes that were patched in more places than they weren't. His face was lined with worry, and his hands trembled slightly as he held on to a crumpled piece of paper. Hi," the man said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I was told you might be able to help." Nolan set down his wrench and gave the man a warm smile. "No bother at all. Come on in. What's wrong?" The man introduced himself as Walter Hayes. "My car broke down about a mile from here," Walter explained, pointing toward the road. "It's an old thing, practically falling apart, but it's all I've got. Without it, I can't get to my appointments or pick up groceries." He paused, looking embarrassed. "I don't have much money right now, though. Just enough for parts, maybe." Nolan nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind those words. "Don't worry about that yet. Let's take a look at it first. Where is it?" Walter led Nolan to where his car sat abandoned on the side of the road. It was a beat-up sedan, its paint chipped and rust eating away at the frame. Even before popping the hood, Nolan could tell it wasn't going to be an easy fix. But something about Walter's demeanor made him determined to try. Back at the shop, Nolan spent hours diagnosing the problem. The engine was shot, and several key components needed replacing. Parts alone would cost far more than Walter could afford. As Nolan worked, he couldn't shake the image of Walter, sitting quietly in the corner, wringing his hands and staring at the floor. There was a sadness in his eyes that went deeper than financial troubles. Finally, Nolan turned to him. "Look, Mr. Hayes, I'll level with you. This isn't going to be cheap, but," he hesitated, thinking of his own struggles. "I'll figure something out. Maybe we can stretch payments over time, or I can find cheaper parts. Either way, I won't leave you stranded." Walter blinked, surprise flickering across his face. "You do that for me? A stranger?" Nolan shrugged, trying to play it off casually. "We've all been there, haven't we? Besides, I didn't start this shop to turn people away." As the days passed, Nolan threw himself into fixing Walter's car. He scavenged spare parts from junkyards, worked late into the night, and skipped meals to save a few extra bucks. Meanwhile, Walter visited the shop daily, bringing homemade sandwiches and offering quiet thanks. Their conversations grew longer, revealing bits and pieces of each other's lives. Walter spoke of losing his wife years ago and living alone ever since. Nolan shared stories of his childhood, filled with laughter and love, until tragedy struck too soon. One afternoon, as Nolan tinkered under the hood, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a sharply dressed man in his 50s, his posture exuding authority. He glanced around the modest shop before settling his gaze on Nolan. "Are you the owner here?" the man asked, his voice smooth but commanding. "Yes, sir," Nolan replied, wiping his oily hands on a rag. "Can I help you?" The man extended his hand. "My name is Victor Langley. Well, let's just say I'm interested in local businesses." Nolan shook his hand cautiously. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Langley. What brings you here?" Victor gestured toward the half-finished sedan. "I happened to pass by earlier and noticed you working on this car. I must admit, I'm impressed by your dedication. Not many young mechanics would go to such lengths for a customer." Nolan shrugged again, feeling uneasy under Victor's scrutiny. "It's just part of the job." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Most would charge whatever they wanted and call it a day. You, however, seem genuinely invested in helping others. That's rare these days." Unsure how to respond, Nolan changed the subject. "So, what exactly are you looking for? Are you thinking of investing in a mechanic shop?" Victor chuckled softly. "Something like that. Tell me, Nolan, how long have you owned this place?" "A couple of years," Nolan admitted. "It's not much, but gets the job done." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "And do you enjoy it?" "More than anything," Nolan said honestly. "There's something satisfying about fixing things, making them work again. Plus, I like knowing I'm helping people." Victor smiled, a hint of admiration in his expression. "Interesting. Very interesting indeed." Over the next few days, Victor became a regular visitor, often stopping by unannounced to observe Nolan at work. At first, Nolan found it unsettling, but eventually, he grew used to the man's presence. Victor never interfered. He simply watched, occasionally asking questions about the repair process or commenting on Nolan's skill. Meanwhile, progress on Walter's car continued steadily. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of relentless effort, Nolan declared it ready. Walter arrived that evening, his eyes widening in disbelief as Nolan handed him the keys. "It's fixed?" Walter asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "As good as new," Nolan assured him. "And don't worry about payment right away. Take your time." Walter shook his head firmly. "No, Nolan, I may not have much, but I'll pay what I owe. You've already done more than enough." They parted ways that night, both feeling lighter somehow. Little did Nolan know, their interaction hadn't gone unnoticed. A week later, Victor returned to the shop, this time accompanied by 2 men in suits carrying briefcases. Nolan greeted them warily, unsure what to expect. "Nolan," Victor began, "I've done some research on you, on this shop, and I must say I'm thoroughly impressed." "Thanks," Nolan replied cautiously. "But why does it matter to you?" Victor opened one of the briefcases, revealing stacks of neatly arranged papers. "Because I believe in supporting businesses that truly make a difference. Your compassion, your work ethic. It's exactly what this community needs." Nolan frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm offering to buy this shop," Victor stated plainly. "Not to shut it down, mind you, but to expand it, to give you the resources you need to reach even more people. With my backing, you could turn this little garage into something extraordinary." Victor smiled knowingly, because not everyone sees the value in kindness. You do, and that's worth investing in. Tears welled up in Nolan's eyes as realization dawned. All those late nights, all the sacrifices, he hadn't done them for recognition or reward. Yet here was someone willing to bet on him, simply because he cared. In the end, Nolan accepted the offer, using the funds to not only upgrade his shop, but also establish a program to train aspiring mechanics from low-income families. Walter remained a close friend, often visiting to share stories and offer advice. Together, they proved that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. And so, the lesson remains. True success isn't measured by wealth or fame, but by the impact we have on others. Sometimes, Helping someone in need doesn't just change their life, it changes yours too. What did you think of the story? Did it resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, no matter where you are in the world, kindness knows no boundaries.